On the morning of August 24th, 79 CE, the people of Pompeii woke up and went about their lives. Bakers lit their ovens before dawn. Fishmongers carried their catch to market through the narrow stone streets while the city was still cool. Shop owners opened their shuttered fronts and filled the terracotta containers that served as street-level bars. Children ran through alleyways. Politicians commissioned graffiti on the walls of public buildings, advertising their candidacies for the next election, and painted letters that Pompeians would paint over and repaint over throughout the campaign. Seasoned with the enthusiastic vulgarity of a democracy that had not yet learned restraint. Gladiators trained in the practice yard behind the amphitheater. Priests opened the temples. Prostitutes in the city's licensed brothels slept late in their small stone rooms, their client lists scratched into the plaster of the walls above their beds. It was an ordinary day. It would be the last ordinary day that Pompeii would ever have. By the following morning, the city, 20,000 people, centuries of accumulated life, the most completely preserved urban civilization from the ancient world, would be buried under 20 feet of volcanic ash, pumice, and superheated gas, sealed, preserved, frozen at the exact moment of its destruction with a completeness that no deliberate act of archaeological conservation could have achieved. The city that died in 24 hours became through the specific cruelty of the mechanism that killed it. The most complete picture of daily life in the Roman world that survives anywhere on Earth, Pompeii, is both a city and a time capsule. Both. A grave and a window. To understand what was lost on that August morning requires first understanding what existed. Pompeii in 79 CE was not a provincial backwater, not some minor Roman town of limited consequence clinging to the slopes of a Campanian hillside. It was a city of the first rank in the most sophisticated civilization the Western world had yet produced. Its location in the fertile volcanic soil of the Campanian plain, the same volcanic geology that was about to destroy it, had made it extraordinarily productive. The agricultural surplus of its surrounding territory supplied markets across the Roman world. Its position at the mouth of the Sarno River made it a natural commercial hub for trade moving through the Bay of Naples. Its proximity to the resort communities of Herculaneum, Stabia, and the fashionable villas that dotted the coastline of the bay meant that Pompeii functioned not merely as a commercial center, but as the service center for the leisure culture of Rome's wealthy classes. The Roman Empire in the 1st century CE was, by any reasonable assessment, the most powerful political entity that had ever existed. Its authority extended from Britain in the northwest to Mesopotamia in the southeast, encompassing a territory of roughly 5 million square kilometers and a population of perhaps 60 million people, a quarter of the entire human population of the Earth at that time. Its engineering was extraordinary, the road network that connected its provinces, the aqueduct systems that supplied its cities with clean water, the architectural achievements of its public buildings, the forums, the amphitheaters, the baths. The temples represented a standard of urban civilization that Europe would not recover for over 1,000 years after Rome's fall. Pompeii embodied all of this. Its forum, the great open public space at the city's commercial and civic heart, was surrounded by temples to Jupiter and Apollo and the deified emperor, by the basilica that served as its law court and commercial exchange, by administrative buildings whose walls bore the marks of the city's active political life. Its amphitheater, built in 70 BCE, one of the oldest stone amphitheaters in the Roman world, held 20,000 spectators for the gladiatorial games that were simultaneously entertainment, religious ceremony, and political statement. Its theater is a large one for dramatic performances and a smaller covered Odeon for musical recitals, testified to a cultural life of genuine sophistication. Its baths, the Stabian baths, the Forum baths, the central bath still under construction when the volcano struck, provided the social institution that was the daily heart of Roman civic life. The place where citizens of different social classes met, conversed, did business, and performed the elaborate rituals of Roman grooming and socialization. Its walls were covered in art, the frescoes that decorated the interior walls of Pompeii's houses preserved with astonishing completeness under the volcanic material that buried them, represent the largest collection of Roman paintings surviving anywhere in the world. Mythological scenes, garden vistas, theatrical landscapes, erotic images, portraits of gods and humans rendered with a naturalistic skill that Renaissance painters would study and admire, all of it sealed under the volcano and recovered. The centuries of excavation that followed the city's rediscovery in 1748, in a condition that allows modern viewers to see Roman painting with a directness available from no other source, the volcano that killed the city saved its art. The mountain itself stood at the northern edge of the city's field of view, a constant presence in the landscape, its peak visible above the rooftops from most of the city's streets. Its slopes covered in vineyards and farms that produced the wine for which Campania was famous across the Roman world. The Pompeians knew the mountain. They had lived with it for generations. They had made it part of their aesthetic. The wine god Bacchus was depicted in local art standing beside the volcanic peak, his association with the fertile slopes as natural and unremarkable as any other feature of the landscape. They did not know what the mountain was. No one in the Roman world had a concept of a volcano. As a geological phenomenon, the word itself did not exist, derived later from the name of Vulcan, the god of fire and forges, applied retrospectively to the phenomena that the eruption of Vesuvius would force the ancient world to recognize and name. The mountain had erupted before, roughly 1700 years before the events of 79 CE, in an eruption that had no living witnesses and left no written record that survived to warn the people in its shadow. The seismic activity that had been building in the region for years before the eruption, the earthquakes, the disturbed wells, the strange behavior of animals, was interpreted through the available frameworks of Roman religious understanding as omens requiring ritual response, rather than as the geological warnings they actually were. The city did not know what was coming. It was going on with its day. The mountain was about to speak for the first time in recorded human memory, and what it said would take 24 hours to say, and the world would still be listening to 1,000 years later. Pompeii was not one thing. It was everything that a Roman city of the first century could be: simultaneously elegant and vulgar, sophisticated and violent, deeply religious and pragmatically commercial, stratified by a social hierarchy so rigid that it determined what you ate and where you sat and how you were addressed and whether your death would be recorded or forgotten, and yet somehow porous enough that the right combination of wealth and ambition could move a person from the artisan class to the merchant class, to something approaching the civic elite within a generation or two to walk through. Pompeii before the eruption was to walk through a city of extraordinary sensory density. The streets were narrow, most of them barely wide enough for a single cart, and the stepping stones that allowed pedestrians to cross between the raised sidewalks without descending into the road were spaced to allow cartwheels to pass between them. A detail that tells you everything about how much organic material was being deposited on those streets by the animals pulling those carts. The noise would have been constant, the clatter of cartwheels on basalt paving stones, the calls of vendors, the sound of hammers from the workshops where craftsmen worked in spaces that opened directly onto the street, the conversations of customers at the thermopolia, the fast food counters, built into the fronts of buildings where the terracotta pots set into the masonry, kept food warm for the city's substantial population of people who had no kitchen in their rented rooms, and ate every meal on the street. The social hierarchy was encoded in the X. Architecture at the top were the wealthy elite, the decurions, the city council members who governed Pompeii's civic life and whose wealth came from agriculture, from property, from the commercial ventures that Roman aristocratic culture simultaneously pursued and pretended to disdain. Domus, the great enclosed family homes that turned blank walls to the street and opened inward to the atrium and the garden beyond, were statements of power written in stone and fresco and mosaic. The House of the Faun, named for the dancing bronze faun found in its impluvium when it was excavated, contained in its floors the Alexander mosaic, a work of such technical and artistic ambition that it depicts the battle of Issus between Alexander the Great and Darius III with the documentary precision and emotional intensity of a masterwork of any era. The house's first owner was one of the most powerful people in Pompeii, someone whose artistic patronage matched their civic ambition. Below the elite were the freedmen, former enslaved people who had been manumitted and who, in the social mobility that Roman society permitted its freed people in ways unusual for ancient slaveholding civilizations, had sometimes risen to considerable commercial suck.